I never imagined I'd be sitting here at 68, reflecting on the deepest betrayal of my life. My name is Grace Hamilton, and just last month I was about to sign away the company my late husband and I had built. As I sat in my living room waiting for my son Luke to join me for what was supposed to be a family meeting, I felt uneasy in a way I couldn't quite place. Little did I know that uneasy feeling would soon be replaced by something much worse. It all began with a simple cup of coffee. My daughter-in-law Claire handed it to me with a warm smile, just like she had on so many mornings before. As I reached for it, I noticed a strange look in her eyes, a glint I hadn't seen before, like she was watching my every move. I didn't think much of it at first, brushing it off as nothing more than the tiredness from running Hamilton Enterprises for the past 18 years, ever since Robert passed away unexpectedly. Claire set the cup down on the table beside me, as if it was part of some well-rehearsed routine. She was always so thoughtful, always so polite. I sipped it absent-mindedly, too lost in my thoughts about Luke and his wife's plans for the business to give much attention to the slight bitterness that lingered on my tongue. It was Luke who called that morning asking me to meet at the house. "Mom, we need to discuss some important changes about the company," he said in his usual serious tone. My heart swelled with pride, thinking of how far we'd come from humble beginnings to a successful family business worth over $10 million. Robert would have been proud of what we'd built, but I had no idea what kind of storm was brewing. I'd always hoped Luke would take the company over one day. He was the heir after all. But something about his request for a meeting set off an alarm in my head. I figured it was time to talk about the future. Who would take the reins when I decided to step back? After all, at my age it was only natural to think about succession planning. I set up the meeting in the study where we had always talked business. It was cozy, surrounded by oak bookshelves filled with company records and family photos. Robert had always loved this room. It was where we would sit after a long day and dream about the future. But today the dream would turn into something else. Luke arrived first, sharp in his designer suit. It was as though he was always more concerned with how he looked than what was truly important. "Mom, good to see you," he said with a quick hug, but something felt off. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Claire's picking up those pastries you like," he added, sitting down across from me at the mahogany desk. Claire walked in a few minutes later, looking flawless in a pale pink blazer. She held a tray with a coffee pot and 3 cups, all neatly arranged as if she had rehearsed the scene in her head. She handed me a cup with a soft smile, and I thanked her politely. Something about the way she handed me the cup made my stomach tighten. She knew how I liked it, but this coffee wasn't quite right. "I thought we could sit down and go over some things," Claire said smoothly as she set the tray down, eyes glinting in a way I couldn't ignore. "It's time for us to think about the future, Grace." I nodded, still trying to shake the odd feeling in my chest. What did they mean by the future? Surely it wasn't just about business plans. I took a sip of the coffee and it hit me. Something was wrong. It wasn't my usual brew. The taste lingered bitterly in my mouth, almost medicinal. Claire and Luke exchanged glances, both watching me intently, their smiles barely hiding something more sinister. That was when the dizziness started creeping in like a fog. I felt lightheaded, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. My thoughts began to slow, and before I knew it, the room felt like it was spinning. "Mom, you're looking a little pale," Luke said, his voice filled with feigned concern. "Maybe you should rest. You've been working so hard lately." I tried to respond, but my words came out thick, slurred, as if my mouth was suddenly full of cotton. What was happening? Had I caught a cold? Or was this something worse? "Just relax, Grace. Everything's going to be fine," Claire reassured me, but her eyes were focused on me with something that looked more like calculation than care. I felt the world tilt around me as I slumped back in my chair. Everything began to blur. Sounds, colors, everything. The only thing that was crystal clear was the realization that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't a simple family meeting. It was a setup. I tried to focus, to push through the fog that was clouding my mind, but it felt like my body was betraying me. My hands felt cold, my heart raced, and the dizziness was overwhelming. I could barely hold myself upright as I slumped further into the armchair. It was as if the room was closing in around me. "Mom, maybe you should lie down," Luke said, though his voice now sounded distant, as if coming from a far-off place. I couldn't tell if he was genuinely concerned or if he was just playing his part in whatever twisted game they were all involved in. I looked up at Claire, who was standing by the table, her hands lightly pressed against her hips. She was still smiling, that same smile that had always made her seem so charming, so friendly. But now it felt forced, like it was a mask she wore to hide something much darker. She was watching me carefully, calculating as if she were waiting for something. I tried to say something, but my voice was barely a whisper. What's happening? Claire leaned in, her face softening as she looked at me with that perfect, reassuring smile. Grace, you've worked so hard all these years. It's time for you to rest, to let Luke and me take over. We've been talking about this for a while, and it's what's best for everyone. Best for everyone. The words didn't sound right. They felt hollow. I tried to focus, but everything was spinning and I was slipping further from reality. I was fading. And then I remembered Rose's warning. Her face, her eyes filled with fear, and the words she had whispered to me earlier. Don't drink any more of that. Just trust me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The coffee. It was supposed to be for me. It wasn't the coffee I had always had. It had been tampered with. I wasn't just dizzy from stress or age. I had been poisoned. I couldn't breathe. The air felt heavy, suffocating. The world around me seemed to blur, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I looked at Luke and Claire. They were still watching me, their eyes calculating. I needed to act, but my body wouldn't respond. I reached for my phone, but it felt like it was miles away, my fingers clumsy and uncoordinated. Why wasn't I able to fight back? The room was silent except for the sound of Claire's soft voice and then Luke's. I'm sorry, Mom, Luke said, his voice barely audible. But it's time for you to step aside. You can't keep running things forever. It's better this way. For everyone. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice was locked inside my throat. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for my family, was about to be taken from me. I had trusted them. I had loved them. And this was how they repaid me. Luke and Claire weren't looking at me with concern anymore. They weren't worried. They were just waiting. Waiting for me to accept that this was how things were now. As the dizziness intensified and the world seemed to fade into black, I realized just how far they were willing to go. I had trusted them, and they had been planning this for months, maybe even years. Claire, who had been so sweet and caring, was now the mastermind, the one pulling the strings. And Luke, my son, had allowed it all to happen. Had been a part of it. The last thing I remembered before everything went black was Claire's voice again, smooth and calculated. This is for the best, Grace. We'll take good care of everything. Just rest. But it wasn't the best for me. It was the best for them. When I opened my eyes, everything was blurry, like a fog hanging over my vision. My head throbbed and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the haze, and slowly the world came into focus. The first thing I saw was a sterile white ceiling. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and the beeping of a heart monitor kept pace with the rhythm of my breath. I was in a hospital. But how had I gotten here? Mom, Luke's voice broke through the haze. I turned my head and saw him sitting beside the bed, his face pale and worried. But his eyes, they weren't the eyes of the son I once knew. There was something else there now, something I couldn't place. Mom, you're awake, he said again, his voice trembling. You scared me. I looked at him, trying to piece together the events. The coffee, the dizziness, the overwhelming sense that something was wrong. Then nothing. Just blackness. Luke, I croaked, my throat dry. What happened? His eyes flickered, and for a moment I saw guilt flash across his face. It was fleeting, but it was there, buried beneath the mask of concern. You collapsed, Mom. It was that coffee. We thought maybe you'd been pushing yourself too hard. They said it was a fainting spell. A fainting spell? No. I knew what had happened. The coffee, it wasn't just a drink. It had been tampered with, and now I was lying in a hospital bed, uncertain of what came next. Claire, I whispered, trying to sit up, but my body felt heavy. Where is she? What happened to her? Luke's expression changed, and I saw him glance at the door. She's at home. They're running tests on you, Mom. They say you're going to be fine. Just rest. I couldn't rest. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it in my bones. Luke, I said, my voice shaking now. I know what happened. I know what you and Claire did. Luke froze. For a moment, his face was blank, like he didn't know what I was talking about. But I could see it in his eyes. He knew. He knew exactly what I was referring to. I don't know what you mean, Mom, he said, his voice trembling. You're just confused from the fainting spell. You're not thinking clearly. No, I whispered, my voice steady despite the pounding in my head. I wasn't fainting. I was poisoned. You poisoned me. It was meant to be my last day. Luke's eyes widened and I saw a flicker of something in them, panic. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the calm mask he had perfected over the years. Mom, you're not well, Luke said, standing up from the chair and walking towards the door. You're just disoriented. You need to rest. I could hear the edge in his voice, the finality, the coldness. He was trying to control the situation, to twist it all back into something that made sense for him. But I wasn't going to let him. Not now. No, I said, my voice stronger. I'm not confused. I know exactly what happened. Claire brought me coffee. It was different and I know now what she did. You both thought I was too old to run the business anymore, didn't you? You thought you could get rid of me and take everything. Luke didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a deep breath, clearly struggling with something beneath the surface. And then, in a voice that was almost too calm, he said, "You don't know what you're talking about, Mom. Claire and I care about you. We never." But I cut him off. "You've been planning this, haven't you? Not just for today but for months. I'm the last to know, the last to see what you and Claire have been doing behind my back. The life insurance, the money you've been taking from the company. You were going to kill me, Luke. And all for what? For money? For control." Luke's face twisted, a flash of anger passing through his eyes before he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Mom, you need to calm down. This is all in your head. We're a family. You're just upset and I'm here for you. Let's talk about this later, okay?" But I wasn't going to let him control the narrative any longer. I had been foolish to trust them, to believe that family could never betray you. The truth was staring me in the face now and I wasn't going to back down. "I don't need you to protect me, Luke," I said, my voice firm despite the weakness in my body. "I need you to face what you've done. You and Claire both. You tried to kill me and I won't let you get away with it." Luke's face turned pale and for a moment he didn't know what to say. He opened his mouth but no words came out. "I'll make sure you both pay for this," I continued, my resolve hardening. "I'm not going to let you destroy me. Not anymore. I had been a fool trusting the people I loved most. But not anymore. I had the truth on my side and I wasn't going to let this betrayal slide. The fight for my life, and my company, was just beginning." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as the hospital room became quieter. Luke's silence was deafening, his nervous energy radiating off him like a thick fog. For a moment he seemed lost for words, but his eyes betrayed the truth. The truth I'd known all along, even before I had the strength to confront him. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice low but steady despite the weakness in my limbs. "I'm going to make sure the truth comes out no matter what." Luke avoided my gaze, staring at the floor. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to come up with some excuse, some lie that could undo the mess they had created. But the damage was done. The coffee, the poisoning, the lies. It was all starting to unravel. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Luke finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you'd actually figure it out. We just wanted to take over the business. It was time. You were slowing down." My heart twisted at the coldness in his words, but I steeled myself. This was the son I had raised, the son I'd trusted. And now he was confessing, but not out of guilt, out of frustration. "I gave you everything, Luke," I said, keeping my voice even. "I worked my whole life to build this company, to provide for this family. And this is how you repay me." He shifted uncomfortably, his hands shaking slightly. "Mom, we didn't mean for it to go this far. We thought it'd be better if you stepped down. Claire. She was just trying to help. Claire." I hadn't spoken to her since I woke up in the hospital, but I knew exactly where she stood. She had been the one to bring me the poisoned coffee. She had been the one to watch, to wait for me to fall so she could step into the role she felt entitled to. She had planned this with Luke. It was all too clear now. "I don't believe you, Luke," I said, my voice firm. "This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. You and Claire both. Don't pretend this wasn't your doing." His face flushed with anger. "You're wrong, Mom. You don't understand." But I cut him off. "No, I understand perfectly. You've been stealing from me, from the company, all for the chance to take over. You've been lying to me, making me believe you were the son I could trust. But all along you were plotting my death. Luke stood up abruptly, pacing around the room, the tension in the air thickening with each step. "You don't know what it's like," he spat, his words dripping with venom. "You don't understand what it's like to have everything handed to you and watch it slip away because you're too old, too out of touch. Claire and I were just trying to secure our future. You were never going to give us a fair chance. All you ever did was hold us back." The words stung, but they didn't break me. I had heard them all before in different forms from different people. The idea that Luke thought he was entitled to everything I had worked for, that he felt justified in doing whatever it took to get it, made my blood run cold. He had crossed a line and there would be no going back. "Are you trying to justify this?" I asked, my voice sharp, my eyes narrowing on him. "Are you really trying to tell me that trying to kill me is okay because you thought I'd outlive my usefulness? You don't get to make that decision, Luke. Not for me. Not for anyone." His shoulders slumped, and he turned away from me as if the weight of his own actions was starting to sink in. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook. Not yet. "I want to talk to the police," I said, sitting up straighter in my bed. "I'm not going to let this go. I need to make sure that Claire and you face the consequences of what you've done." Luke turned back toward me, his face suddenly a mask of calm. "Mom, you don't have to do this. I can fix this. We can fix this. Just let me handle it." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You don't get to handle this. You've handled everything for too long and look where that's gotten us. You've betrayed me, Luke. And you will face the consequences." He didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the door and paused, his hand resting on the doorknob. I could see the conflict in his eyes, but there was something else there too, something darker. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice low. "I never meant for it to go this far." And with that, he left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the certainty that my world had just been turned upside down. The next few days blurred into one another as I waited for answers. The hospital room was too sterile, too quiet, and the smell of antiseptic made my stomach turn. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had become a twisted version of what I thought was my reality. Luke, my son, was a stranger to me now, and Claire had been in on it all along. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. The police had arrived at the hospital, their faces serious as they questioned me about what happened. I told them everything, leaving out nothing. I described the coffee, the strange taste, and the dizziness that followed. I described Luke's coldness, Claire's premeditated kindness, and the way they had looked at me when they thought I wouldn't notice. But the investigation wasn't moving fast enough. I could feel it in my gut that there was more to the story, more than I had even realized. I had to act, and I had to act fast. As I sat there in the hospital bed, my mind racing, I couldn't shake the image of the two of them, Luke and Claire, sitting in front of me, pretending to care, pretending that everything was fine, all while plotting my demise. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about the business. This was about control. They wanted everything, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. I wasn't going to let that happen. When the door opened and Detective Thomas stepped into the room, I immediately knew I had to do more than just sit back and wait. He looked at me with concern in his eyes, but his expression was hardened. He had been the one to speak to me the most after everything had happened, and I could tell that he was beginning to understand the depth of what had gone on in my home. "Grace," he said, settling into the chair next to my bed. "We've made some progress. We have some evidence from the security footage at your home. We're also looking into the bank accounts. But there's something you need to know. The more we look into it, the worse it seems." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, worse?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. "We've found life insurance policies. More than one. All in your name. Your son Luke took out several policies on you over the past year. There's also money missing from your business accounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars." My stomach dropped. I hadn't even known about the insurance policies, but it didn't surprise me anymore. It was all a part of the plan. A plan that had been carefully crafted and executed by the people I loved the most. "And Claire?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's been involved too. We have statements from employees at the insurance company. She's the one who helped Luke set up some of the policies. She's more than just an accomplice. She's been an active participant in this." I leaned back against my pillow, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. My own son. My daughter-in-law. They had betrayed me. And now they were both going to pay the price. I felt a surge of anger, but it was mixed with something else. Something that I didn't expect to feel. Disappointment. I had trusted them. I had loved them. And yet they had treated me as if I was nothing more than a stepping stone on their way to power and wealth. Detective Thomas continued, his voice calm but filled with gravity. We also found a vial of poison in Claire's office. Arsenic. It's clear now that she was planning this for months, maybe longer. Arsenic. The word hit me like a slap in the face. I had always thought I knew who these people were, but I was wrong. This wasn't just about greed. It was about something darker, something that went beyond money. This was about power, about taking control of everything I had worked for, including my life. How much longer do I have to wait? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. How long before they're arrested? It won't be long, he said, his tone reassuring. We've got enough evidence now to make arrests. It's just a matter of time before we bring them in. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead. I couldn't just sit here waiting for the justice system to work. I needed to take control of this situation myself. Luke and Claire had crossed a line. No, several lines, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not after everything they had done to me. What about Rosa? I asked suddenly, remembering the housekeeper who had saved me that day by spilling my coffee. What's happening with her? Is she involved in this? Detective Thomas's expression softened slightly. Rosa's a witness, Grace. She's been invaluable to us. We're working on getting her testimony and we're protecting her. She was just trying to help, and she's not at fault for any of this. I let out a breath of relief. Rosa had saved my life, and I wasn't going to let her be dragged into this mess. Good, I said. She deserves to be safe. The days dragged on as the investigation continued, each one a painful reminder of the betrayal that had been brewing under my roof for months. Luke and Claire were still free, though I knew it was only a matter of time before they were arrested. The truth was slowly unraveling, but it wasn't enough. I needed to confront them, needed to see their faces when they realized they were going to lose everything. I had been through so much already, but this was the final step. The one where I reclaimed my life and my dignity. They had stolen everything from me, but they weren't going to take away my sense of justice. Not without a fight. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the folder of evidence Detective Thomas had given me. It was thick, packed with documents, photos, and statements. It wasn't just the life insurance policies, the missing funds, or the poison. There was something else, something even more damning. Claire and Luke had been plotting not just my death, but a complete takeover of the business. They had planned to dismantle everything I'd worked for, to sell off assets, fire employees, and make the company their own. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. Just as I was lost in thought, my phone rang. It was Detective Thomas again. Grace, we have a breakthrough, he said, his voice urgent. We're moving forward with the arrests today. We have enough evidence to bring them in, and we're ready to make a move. I need to know, are you ready to face them? I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the phone. Yes, I said firmly. I'm ready. The decision had been made. I wasn't going to wait for them to destroy everything. It was time to take control. I could already feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. The truth was out, and now it was time for justice. I'll be there, I said, ending the call and standing up. I walked to the window, looking out over the quiet neighborhood. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago I had been sitting in my living room thinking everything was fine. Thinking I could trust the people closest to me. I had been wrong, and now I had to face the consequences of that. Luke and Claire were going to learn that betrayal came with a price. The drive to the police station was a blur. My thoughts kept circling back to Luke. To Claire. To the years I had spent trusting them, building a life with them. And now it was all crumbling. When I arrived, Detective Thomas was already waiting for me. He gave me a reassuring smile, but I could see the tension in his eyes. We both knew what was coming. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice low. I nodded, the resolve within me stronger than it had ever been. I'm sure. Let's do this. We entered the interrogation room where Luke and Claire were waiting. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of everything that had happened. Luke sat with his arms crossed, his eyes flicking nervously between the detective and me. Claire, however, seemed perfectly composed, her face a mask of indifference. Well, Claire said, her voice smooth as silk. I see the prodigal mother has finally come to confront us. I couldn't help but feel a pang of anger at the way she dismissed me, as if everything I'd done for them had meant nothing. "I'm not here to argue, Claire," I said, my voice cold. "I'm here for the truth." Luke shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Claire just smiled. "What truth is that? The truth that you've always been too controlling? Too obsessed with your little business? Is that what you want to hear?" I met her eyes, the same eyes that had once seemed so warm, so welcoming. Now they were nothing more than cold, calculating windows to the heart of a liar. "The truth about your plans to kill me. The truth about the money you've been stealing. The truth about everything you and Luke have been doing behind my back." For a moment there was silence. Then Luke spoke, his voice tight. "You don't know what you're talking about, Mom. This is all just misunderstanding. We never meant for it to go this far." "Save it, Luke," I said, cutting him off. "The evidence is already stacked against you. The poison, the life insurance, the bank accounts. It's all there. There's no denying it now." Claire stood up, her expression changing from calm to something darker. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said, her voice low, almost menacing. "You think you've figured it all out, but you're wrong. This is just the beginning, Grace." I stood tall, ignoring the tremor in my hands. "No, Claire. This is the end. For you, for Luke, for everything you thought you could take from me." The door opened behind us and 2 officers stepped inside, their presence a silent confirmation of the truth. Detective Thomas looked at me, his expression serious. "It's over, Grace," he said quietly. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. The battle wasn't over, not yet, but the first step toward justice had been taken. As the officers moved toward Luke and Claire, the air in the room shifted. Luke looked at me one last time, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "I'll never forgive you for this, Mom," he spat. I didn't flinch. "I'll never forgive you either, Luke." And with that, they were taken away. The days following Luke and Claire's arrests were a blur of legal proceedings, phone calls, and a constant stream of reporters outside my door. The entire city seemed to be watching the unfolding drama. My son and daughter-in-law arrested for attempting to murder me. It felt surreal, like a story I might have read in a newspaper, not something that had happened to me. But it had. It was real. And the weight of it all was heavy on my shoulders. Detective Thomas kept me updated, but there were moments when I felt completely alone in this battle. The world I had known, the life I had worked so hard to build, was shattered, and now I had to figure out what came next. I spent most of my time at the Whitmore Foundation trying to keep my mind occupied. Rosa, my loyal housekeeper, had become an irreplaceable part of my team. After everything she'd done to save me, I couldn't imagine my life without her. She had stood by me when no one else had, and now as we worked together, I could finally begin to see a future where betrayal didn't define me. But despite the progress I was making, there was still a gnawing feeling inside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luke's face. The face of my son, the one I had raised, the one I had trusted. And each time I thought of Claire, her fake warmth, her calculated kindness, it made my stomach churn. The truth about their plan had come to light, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. It was a week after their arrests that I received a call from the prosecutor's office. They wanted me to testify in court. I had known this day would come, but when the reality hit, it was almost overwhelming. It wasn't just about the legalities or the charges. It was about facing the people who had betrayed me, hearing their lies in front of a judge and jury, and finally finding closure. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I had no choice. The trial was set and I had to prepare myself. Rosa and I spent hours discussing what I would say. I wanted to be strong, but I didn't want to show the jury my pain. They needed to understand that this wasn't just about money or business. It was about family. It was about trust. And the way my son and daughter-in-law had completely destroyed that. The morning of the trial, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my suit. I looked older than I felt, the lines around my eyes deepened by the weight of everything that had happened. But I was ready. Ready to stand up for myself, ready to tell the truth, ready to make sure Luke and Claire faced the consequences of their actions. When I entered the courtroom, my eyes scanned the room. The defense team was already there, including Jonathan Blackwood, the slick lawyer Luke had hired to defend him. The man didn't even look up when I walked in. Too focused on his notes, too confident in his ability to manipulate the system. But I wasn't about to let him manipulate the truth. Claire sat behind her lawyer, her face pale, her eyes vacant. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. But I could feel her hatred radiating in the air, a thick tension that I could almost taste. And then I saw Luke. He sat across the room, his hands clenched into fists. When our eyes met, a flicker of something passed between us. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't regret, it was a final goodbye. In his eyes I saw the person he had become, and it made my stomach turn. The trial began, and the prosecutor walked up to the podium presenting the evidence. The recordings, the life insurance policies, the poison, every lie, every betrayal laid out for all to see. I was called to the stand, and as I made my way up, I could feel every eye on me. The weight of the room seemed to press down on me, but I held my head high. This was my moment. This was my truth. I took the oath and looked out at the jury, my voice steady as I began to speak. I am Evelyn Whitmore, I said, my voice clear. And I am the mother of the man who tried to kill me. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. But they were the truth. And the truth had to be told. I spoke of the coffee, the way it had tasted, how the dizziness had overtaken me. I told them of the long hours I had spent building Whitmore Industries, the pride I had taken in it, and how my son and daughter-in-law had taken that away from me. How they had manipulated me, poisoned me, and tried to steal everything I had worked for. But the hardest part wasn't the words. It wasn't the evidence. It was looking at Luke. It was seeing the person he had become, the son I had loved, the son who had plotted my death. I saw the flicker of something in his eyes as I spoke. Perhaps guilt, perhaps fear. But I didn't care. It was too late for apologies. When I finished my testimony, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was done. The truth was out, and now the chips would fall where they may. But as I left the stand, I felt something else. A sense of closure. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The last moment of the betrayal. And now I was ready to move forward. The trial stretched on for days, each one filled with tension and emotional weight. But as the final day arrived, I felt a sense of calm settling over me. It was as if the universe had shifted slightly, just enough to let me know that I was going to be okay, that I was going to come out of this stronger than I had ever been before. The defense tried everything they could to paint Luke as a victim. They tried to convince the jury that Claire had manipulated him, that he was simply following her lead. But their arguments fell flat. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the photos, the testimonies, they all painted a clear picture. Luke and Claire had been partners in this betrayal, and no amount of manipulation from their lawyer could change that. I sat in the courtroom as the jury deliberated, waiting for the verdict. Every moment felt like an eternity. The clock on the wall ticked louder and louder in my ears, each second stretching into what seemed like hours. Finally, the jury filed back in. The judge asked for the verdict, and the foreman stood up, holding the piece of paper that would change everything. We, the jury, find the defendants, Luke Whitmore and Claire Whitmore, guilty of all charges. The words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of relief. It was over. They were going to pay for what they had done to me. My family, my real family, was going to be safe from them. The courtroom was filled with murmurs, and I felt the weight of the moment settle in. Luke and Claire's faces were a mixture of disbelief and fury, but I didn't care. They were no longer my concern. Later, when the sentencing came, I was asked to provide a victim impact statement. I knew what I had to say, and though the words were difficult, I said them with the clarity that only comes from truth. Luke and Claire tried to take everything from me. I began, my voice strong despite the emotions bubbling inside. They tried to take my life, my legacy, my business, and my trust. But what they didn't take was my spirit. What they didn't take was my ability to rebuild, to move forward, and to find peace. I looked out over the courtroom, my eyes briefly meeting Detective Thomas's. He nodded, a small but meaningful gesture that told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I'm here today not just for justice but for a future, I continued. For a future where I can rebuild my life, where I can continue the work I've started, and where I can honor the people who have stood by me. My story is not one of defeat. It is a story of survival, of rising above betrayal, and finding strength when it seemed impossible. With those words, I finally let go. I let go of the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal that had consumed me for so long. And as I walked out of the courtroom that day, I knew that I was walking into a new chapter of my life. A chapter where trust, love, and loyalty were my guiding forces. Months passed, and the Whitmore Foundation continued to grow. Rosa and I had created something beautiful, something born out of pain but filled with purpose. Together we worked to help victims of elder abuse, to give them a voice when they had none, to give them hope when it seemed like there was none. I kept my distance from Luke and Claire. I didn't need their letters or their apologies. I didn't need their excuses. What mattered now was the work I was doing, the people I was helping, and the family I had chosen. Sometimes I would sit in my office late at night reflecting on everything that had happened, and I would think about how lucky I was to have survived. Not just physically but emotionally. I had faced the darkest side of human nature, and yet I had come out the other side stronger. And then I'd hear a knock on the door. Rosa would be standing there holding 2 cups of coffee, and for a moment everything felt right. For all the wrong that had happened, for all the betrayal and pain, there was still something beautiful in the world. Something I could hold on to. As I took the cup from her, she smiled. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her cup. "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling the warmth of the coffee in my hands and the warmth of hope in my heart. Thank you for joining me in this journey of survival and justice. If you've ever been through betrayal or hardship, you know that it's never easy. But remember, you are not alone. If you're still here, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know how you would handle betrayal in your own life. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Stay strong and always choose to rise above.